السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I apologize I missed the first class. الله المستعان. الله سبحانه وتعالى make it easy إن شاء الله. We continue إن شاء الله تعالى with Surah Al-Balad, and we stopped at ayah number 11. Ayah number 11 in Surah Al-Balad, فَلَقُتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ. So we'll take إن شاء الله تعالى from 11 till the end, till ayah number 20. So I'll recite إن شاء الله تعالى. Recite after me. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. فَلَقُتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ. فَلَقُتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ. The qaf with the sukun has qalqala. فَلَقُتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةِ. وما مد أدراك, the dal with qalqala and the ra is heavy. وما أدراك ما العقبة. Next ayah, فك رقبة. فك رقبة. That's easy. أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة. أو إطعام, طاء with سكون قلقلة. إطعام, this is now إخفاء. إطعام في يوم, another إخفاء, في يوم ذي مسغبة. أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة. يتيما ذا مقربة. يتيما إخفاء. يتيما ذا مقربة and the qaf has قلقلة. أو مسكينا ذا متربة. أو مسكينا ذا إخفاء. ثم كان من الذين آمنوا وتواصوا بالصبر وتواصوا بالمرحمة. ثم ميم الشدة, كان من الذين آمنوا وتوا not وتوا, وتواصوا and the صاد is heavy. وتواصوا بالصبر and the باء has قلقلة. وتواصوا بالمرحمة. بالمرحمة. أولئك أصحاب الميمنة. والذين كفروا بآياتنا هم أصحاب المشأمة. عليهم نار مؤصدة. عليهم نار, this is إدغام with غنة. نار مؤصدة. So when we look at the meaning of the verses, فَلَقُتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ. فَلَقُتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ, the translation says, but he has not broken through the difficult pass. Continuing of what has been mentioned before, and the last thing that was mentioned is the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon the human beings, with some details of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him eyes and tongue and lips, and shown him the two ways, the good and the bad, the truth and the falsehood. So then فَلَقْ وَتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ, but he has not broken through the difficult pass. That means he did not go through it. And اقتحم, as we'll talk about it, al-iqtiham is when you go through something with force, right? When you have the word is used, and we'll talk about it when we talk about word to word. The word is used when armies or when forces, for example, the police, they storm into a place. That word is used, اقتحام, right? So they enter in a place, they storm a place with force. So فلق وتحم العقبة, that means he did not enter or storm, or he has not broken through al-aqaba. Al-aqaba is the difficult pass. Al-aqaba is a barrier, something that is difficult. And what is this aqaba is mentioned in the next verses. That means this human being, he ought to break through the difficult pass, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him fi kabad. As we heard before, he created him having the ability to face difficulties. So he should face the difficulties, and he should not follow his desire instead, but rather he should do what is right, even if it's against his desire. Even if it's something that is like a barrier, like something that is a difficult path for him, he should still get to it and pass this path and be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, a person is following his desires. فَلَقْ وَتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ. What is al-aqaba? فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ. فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ, that means, فَلَقْ وَتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ وَمَا أَدْرَكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةِ. What can make you know what is the aqaba? What is the aqaba? What is this aqaba, this barrier? And aqaba is something that makes it difficult for a person to pass a certain path. For example, there's a big stone or a rock or something like this. What is it? فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ. It is the freeing of a slave. So to free a slave, this is something, whether to help it to be freed by paying whatever it takes for it to be freed, or even to free a captive that is, like for example, a Muslim being captured by the disbelievers, as it's mentioned in the Tafseer. So فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ. This is one of the things that requires for a person to suppress his own desires, because wealth or money is something that is precious, and a person is greedy by nature. So to give or to pay lots of money to free a slave, this is aqaba. This is a difficult one. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying for the believers to break through this difficulties by suppressing, or by stepping over our desire to do what is right, to free a slave, if a person, of course, has the means to do so. أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة, or feeding on a day of severe hunger. So it's not just any feeding. At ease, people have ease to feed. When people are encouraged, for example, to give food for the poor, if a masjid make an announcement, people will bring all kinds of things, mashallah, because there's generosity and there's goodness, of course, right? This is no doubt. But here the ayah talks أو إطعام في يوم ذي مزغبة. To give and to feed, إطعام is to feed. In a day, ذي مزغبة. ذي مزغبة, that means when there's a famine, when people are in so much in need and severe hunger, they would still give others to eat. Of course, they won't cause themselves to die to give others. This is over one's capacity. But when they are in dire need, they would share whatever they have. أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة, to feed on a day that it's a day of hunger or a day of famine, that a person fears for himself, but he still feed others. يتيما ذا مقربة, an orphan of near relationship. So he has two reasons why to be fed. He's an orphan, and the orphan is the one that lost his father before the age of puberty. And he is faqir, he's a yatim, I'm sorry, and he is someone of relationship. So he's a relative, and of course he's poor because it's feeding him. That means he doesn't have the money to feed himself. So he is relative, he is poor, and he is an orphan. So he has more rights than anyone else. أو مسكينا ذا متربة, or a needy person in misery. أو مسكينا ذا متربة, and matraba comes from the turab, comes from the dust. That means he has been attached to the dust. It's a literal meaning that refers to the meaning of so much need and so much necessity, that he's miskeen. And as we heard before, the miskeen comes from sukun, the one that is poor, that the poverty made him not moving too much, that he looks like a humble person, that he's weak, that he is not able to sustain the necessities of his life. So to feed someone in that state, this is basically the aqaba, or to break through the aqaba, or the difficult path. And we'll talk more about this because it needs more attention. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best how the human beings, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them. So he knows exactly, and he knows best how they function. So this is ourselves. We have these barriers and difficulties in ourselves. We have to overcome that. We have to struggle within our own selves. There's no easy route, basically, to apply the deen in a perfect way. And when we say there's no easy route, even though the religion is easy, but you have to overcome your desires. We have to overcome our desires. We have to have that jihad and the struggle within our own selves to do what is right. It's not to be extreme or to do something against human nature. The deen of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not ordering us to burn ourselves or to stay up in the heat sun to do nothing but to torture ourselves. There's no such a thing. It's not torturing ourselves. It's not burdening ourselves. It's doing what is right. So as mentioned in the verses here, to give when a person is in need, then he would give also. And he would feed the poor and the orphans and even the obligations to make salah, whether you feel like making the salah or you don't feel like making salah. The halal and the haram. If everyone around you are not supporting you in matters of goodness and matters of steadfast upon the deen, you would still be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is aqaba. This is not an easy thing, to be a stranger among people, to hold fast to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when everything else around the person is encouraging him to do otherwise. And human beings, they tend to like to mingle with people and things of that nature. So this is something to reflect upon. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants our way of dealing with what is right and what is wrong is to do what is right in that sense, فَلَا قَتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ, that this is something that needs to storm into it, to get into it with force, to force ourselves to be obedient to Allah till it becomes, as mentioned in the previous surah, Surah Al-Fajr, till a person becomes or have a nafs mutma'inna, to be content and to be in state of tranquility with the obedience of Allah. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ثُمَّ كَانَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْمَرْحَمَةِ, and then being among those who believed and advised one another to patience and advised one another to compassion. ثُمَّ كَانَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. آمَنُوا, they believed in their hearts with what they need to believe in, and they did righteous good deeds physically, with every speech and every action, whether it's mandatory or recommended. And وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, they advised. At-tawasi is to advise, is to enjoin one another with a sabr. So this is an amazing one. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, and this is mentioned also in Surah Al-Asr and so on, is not just to be upon patience, but rather to be upon patience and to encourage others to be patient, to advise others to be patient. Patient with what? Patient to be obedient to Allah. Patient to be away from committing sins. And to be patient with the qadr, the things that a person might face in this life that is difficulty for him, to advise one another, be patient. Be patient with the deen of Allah. Not to change in the deen of Allah for us to make the deen follow our desires. If at certain times it's difficult for people, for example, for women to observe hijab, it's difficult for people to, stay away from haram, money-wise, transactions, whatever there is, just be patient with the obedience of Allah. You can't get a house unless you deal with riba and usury. Be patient with the deen of Allah. Not to find fatwas to make what's haram permissible, but rather if it's based on knowledge, sure, mashallah, if it's based on what the truth is. If not, then be patient. And for example, the alim or the mufti, it is not his job to make haram halal, but rather to show to the people what's halal and what's haram. Yes, if he has an idea of how to make it easy for the people based on the deen of Allah, sure, he would advise the people. But if not, just be patient with the deen of Allah. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And that, this happens when a person is at ease with it. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْمَرْحَمَةِ. And they advise one another with al-marhama. Al-marhama is the mercy, the compassion towards one another. So to advise oneself and others, to give the needy, the poor, to teach the one that is ignorant, to take care of their needs, whether it's worldly matters, religious matters, to love for them what you love for yourself, to hate for them what you hate for yourself. These are the people that, if they have these characteristics, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had guided them to iqtiham al-aqaba. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided them to break through the difficulty or the difficult paths that they're ordered to do. These are the believers. What's the reward for them? أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ. Those are the companions of the right. Al-Maymana, from the right. They are the people that would receive their books of deeds in the day of judgment with their right hand. These are the people of Jannah. Why? Because of what's mentioned in these previous verses. They fulfilled the rights of Allah and the rights of the creation of Allah, and they stayed away from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade them. This is basically how to be happy and the signs of happiness in this life and in the hereafter. And whoever has these qualities, you would never find them in state of depression or sadness or misery. Why? Because they have overcome their own desires to do what is right, and they're obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they have this care towards others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them and give them great reward and contentment in their hearts, and they're busy in this life to do what is right. On the other hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِنَا هُمْ أَصْحَابُ الْمَشْأَمَةِ. But they who disbelieved in our signs, those are the companions of the left. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. Those who disbelieved in the ayat of Allah. They disbelieved in the truth. They disbelieved in the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are Ashabul Mash'ama, the people of the owner of the left, those who would receive their books of deeds with their left hand. عَلَيْهِمْ نَارٌ مُؤْصَدَةٌ. That means over them will be fire closed in. Closed in. The fire would be shut down on them. They cannot leave it. And al-iqtiham, as we heard before, is to storm into a place that is difficult for someone to get in. And the hellfire, when the hellfire is closed on them, they cannot storm out of it. They cannot break it whatsoever. There's no action for them but to be continuously punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. عليهم نار مؤصدة. And this is, as it's mentioned, even in some of in another verse, في عمد ممددة. That means it's been locked from the inside also with these pillars, as it's mentioned in the other surah. So this is briefly what's mentioned in Tafseer of Imam al-Sa'di rahimahullah. When we look at the words again, go through these verses again and get to know it. فَلَا قُتَحْمَ الْعَقَبَةِ, which means fala is negating something, which means that they did not اقتحم, which, as we said, the roots of it is qaf ha mim, right? So is to enter into a place, right? But to enter in a place with difficulty, it requires force, it requires efforts, right? And also it comes into the meaning of getting into a place that the place is dangerous, right? Like again, when the police, for example, they storm into a place, right? They don't know what's beyond the door. And my people that have arms, they have, and you can imagine their state in their hearts when they're facing something like this. So this is all comes with al-iqtiham or iqtahama. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, mentioned that هذا فوج مقتحم معكم لا مرحبا بكم. This is how they will be also thrown into the hellfire. So فلا اقتحم العقبة, and العقبة comes from عين قاف باء. And Al-Aqaba, it's the name of a city, right? There's a city called Al-Aqaba, and I guess they named it because it's kind of a difficult pass, or a tight pass, or a small pass, where ships it's a harbor. But anyway, Al-Aqaba is something of a barrier, and Al-Aqib is the end part of one's foot, the heels, right? So, but Al-Aqaba is basically the difficult path, or the difficult barrier, or any form of difficulties. فَقَتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةَ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةَ. And as you said before, every time there is وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا something, what do you know about something? It's to bring first in our hearts that this is a big thing. It's a matter, that something that needs attention from the person. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةَ. What is the عقبة? فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ. فَكْ is from fa, kaf. Kaf is to free. Fak, when you untie something or a knot, you do the same thing. Al-fak is to you undo something. So fakku raqaba. Raqaba is a neck, and that refers to the slave, because of how, that's the literal meaning of raqaba, because the image of a slave is always chained. They are they don't own anything. So to free them from this captivity that they're in, this is a great deed. Or إطعام is feeding, from طاء عين ميم. إطعام في يوم, in a day, ذي مسغبة. ذي is the name of the ownership of something. ذي مسغبة, that day is a day of مسغبة. مسغبة comes from sin غين باء سغب, and then مسغبة is the famine, and also السغبة is the hunger. And the hunger with tiredness, not just any hunger, but hunger and this is what famine is. في يوم ذي مسغبة. يتيما ذا مقربة, as you said, yatim, from ya ta mim, which is the one that lost his father before the age of puberty. يتيما ذا مقربة. That again, ownership of مقربة. مقربة, that he is from قاف را باء قرب, or قربة, that means he's near, which basically refers to relationships, relatives. أو مسكين. Miskin is a needy person, come from sin kaf noon. That's how he is humbled, not moving. مسكين ذا متربة. متربة comes from ta ra ba. That means he's so poor that, and the turab, or the dust, is mentioned here to show that how poor he is. ثم كان من الذين آمنوا. He become from الذين, those who آمنوا, those who believed. وتواصوا. So الذين آمنوا from ألف ميم نون. وتواصوا, that means they enjoin or advise one another, from واو صاد ياء. وصى, الوصية, big with, advise. وتواصوا, they did that to one another. وتواصوا بالصبر, with or to patience. وتواصوا بالمرحمة, and they advised one another with المرحمة. Al-Marhama, compassion, from Ra, Hain, Ha, Mim. That's the same thing with Rahma, mercy. So the compassion and the mercy. So this is part of them. أولئك أصحاب الميمنة. They are the people of Al-Maymana, and Al-Maymana is basically the right hand, from Ya, Mim, Noon. And Al-Maymana also refers to the barakah, or the blessings. والذين كفروا بآياتنا, those who disbelieved in our ayat, هم أصحاب المشأمة. They are أصحاب, the ownership of المشأمة. And المشأمة comes from Shin Alif Mim, and that's the left hand, and it also gives the meaning of الشؤم. الشؤم is the pessimism, the evil thing. عليهم نار مؤصدة. عليهم, over them, نار, fire, comes from نون واو راء. مؤصدة. مؤصدة, closed in, from وصدة, واو صاد دال, when something is shut down. There's no way for them to get out of it. So this is the end of the surah, and inshallah ta'ala, tomorrow we'll talk. Tomorrow we'll have next time, inshallah ta'ala, which is Thursday, we'll talk about the benefits of it, inshallah. Talk about the benefits of it, and we need to, if you're not having it, memorize it, and keep on repeating these meanings on one's heart. We are in need of this. You see how the Deen of Islam teaches us to be strong and to overcome our weaknesses and desires, and not to surrender to our desires and to be weak, but rather we have to put the effort and to be patient and to seek help from Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easy because we have it in ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with the ability to face these difficulties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the surah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us steadfast upon the deen of Allah. Barakallahu feekum. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammad wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.